Straight ahead on Face the State, remembering a president who grew up in Connecticut, George H.W. Bush. We talk with two locals who worked under the 41st president, former Congresswoman Nancy Johnson and Greg Butler, who was a young attorney in the Bush Justice Department. Our flashback: Bush spent his formative years in Connecticut and fathered a president here. Plus, why aren't Republicans winning more seats in Connecticut? We'll talk with Nancy Johnson about that too. Also, what do cities and towns want from Governor-elect Lamont? We are joined by Bristol Mayor Ellen Zoppo-Sassu, Columbia First Selectman Steve Everett, and Bolton First Selectman Sandra Pirog. It's all straight ahead this Sunday morning, December 9th, 2018.
From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
It's 8:30 and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Dennis House. This certainly was an historic week across our country and in Connecticut as we remembered President George Herbert Walker Bush. And with us today to talk about his legacy is the former Congresswoman from the 5th District and the 6th before that. That's right. Nancy Johnson and Greg Butler. He is the General Counsel for Eversource and worked in the Bush Justice Department. We thank you both for being with us here today.
Thank you, Dennis.
First of all, you obviously knew the president much longer than Mr. Butler. Tell us a little bit about your experience with him.
Well, you know, he was exactly who was presented in the last couple of days. I mean, he was the kind of guy you'd walk up to in a meeting at the White House or something, you know, I'll be tooling around waiting for things to get going, and always very pleasant, always listening. If you were in a meeting with him, he would listen to what you had to say. I mean, anybody who gets up there at a convention and talks about 1,000 points of light as being important enough for a president to put forward understands what makes our communities vital. It's the people and it's what they do for each other. And he was unique in that way. His depth of love of family, his depth of understanding of community. And it's such an important message for us now.
Mr. Butler, you didn't work with him directly, but he was a guiding force over the entire administration and the Justice Department back then. You know, what do you remember about him?
Well, a couple of things. So just to the Congressman's point about how he had a real human quality to him. As a young lawyer, I made a presentation to him on a particular piece of legislation that we thought he ought to be supporting. I get back to my office, and about a day or so later, I get a little note from him, a little handwritten note. Hot damn, that was a great idea. Now, when you're a young lawyer in the Justice Department, you get a note from the President of the United States after you've just briefed him on something. That's a pretty big day for you, you know. So you walk around and show your colleagues, you know, I did something good. The President really liked it. But you know, he's a hero. I mean, honest to God, he's my hero. The 1,000 Points of Light is, for those of my generation, almost that same John F. Kennedy, what can you do for your country kind of call to arms. He advocated for, signed the Americans with Disabilities Act. That was something that I actually worked on the implementation regs. And then little did I know that 30 years later that was going to be so important to my life as my wife got ill.
He was also a big Connecticut guy. Let's take a little look at some pictures and some video of him back in the day.
George Herbert Walker Bush moved to this house on Grove Lane in Greenwich shortly after he was born. He was one of 5 children born to Dorothy and Prescott Bush, a wealthy businessman who later was elected U.S. Senator from Connecticut.
I shall always be grateful to the people of Connecticut for having given me the great privilege of representing them in the Senate of the United States.
Their lifestyle protected them from the Great Depression. George Bush went by limousine to Greenwich Country Day School. After becoming a hero in World War II, he returned to Connecticut to attend Yale University, where he became a star baseball player and was remembered as an all-around good guy.
When the going got tough, he was tough at the plate. He was a clutch hitter. Oh, gosh, I can see him now. The bases were loaded. We were down 2 runs. He hit a triple, and he won the ball game for us.
With his new bride, Barbara, Bush lived at this home on Hillhouse Avenue near Yale, not far from Grace New Haven Hospital, now Yale New Haven. It's there where the future president, George W. Bush, was born.
Of course, he called himself a Texan, but you can't take all that away.
That's right.
He grew up in Connecticut. He became a man here in Connecticut. How should the state memorialize or remember him?
Well, I think he's going to be an extraordinarily important president to study, because his effectiveness was often because he didn't do what most politicians would do. For instance, when the wall fell in Berlin, he didn't jump in and say, yeah, the Allies were right there. Yep, America was right there. He stood back. He let Germany become itself. He let Europe become itself. And after Gorbachev, when he became president, he was right in there on start one, start two. What if people really care about that? Not an awful lot.
I think he's going to be viewed as one of the founding fathers of the 21st century. I mean, the things that he was able to accomplish in the short window that he was president, and those matters that he presided over, the fall of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Berlin Wall, et cetera, these are the things that set the stage for where we are today. And so I think he's going to go down in history as a great president.
You know, Mr. Butler, as you know, this tends to be a Democratic state. We don't see any Ronald Reagan elementary schools or anything like this in our state. Do you think there'll be something named after George W. Bush?
I sure hope so.
And what should it be?
I think we should have schools, because one of the things that the president was really keen on was young people. I mean, he loved being with young people. He loved being with his grandchildren, and as I said, inspiring generations like me. So having schools named after him, I think, would be a wonderful thing.
Congresswoman Johnson?
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to not only name a school after him, but for us to get our universities to begin using him as somebody to look at as to how can government really work better. Because his ability to make hard decisions, I mean, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, he said this will not stand. He built a coalition and it didn't stand, you know. But he never took credit for everything. He always recognized that politics is about getting people to work together. And we've kind of forgotten that. I mean, identity politics is about everybody doing their own thing. And his politics was what's good for America, what's good for our society, how do we bring people together, how do we make the right things happen. And he was powerful at that. I think that bill that he wrote you that cute thank you note about was about benefits to people. I've forgotten exactly what it was. But look at who would have ever thought the disabilities law would have such a powerful systemic effect. I mean, we developed the technology the world now depends on. We developed the scientific information necessary to reduce the number of disabilities, to prevent disabilities, to enable people to overcome disabilities. So it's he is an unusual guy, because at the height of his power, and the president is very powerful, it was never about him. Even when he had to give on Read My Lips, he got a cap on entitlements, which at that point were even growing out of control. And he was willing to do that because he restructured spending in such a way that taxes wouldn't have to keep going up. But he took the hit for it.
Mr. Butler, in death, how do you think he inspires young politicians today?
Well, I hope that young politicians watched the funeral and watched all of the pomp and the circumstance, but I hope they listened to what people said, people of all stripes in life, and took that notion of public service seriously, but also the civility. I think this president was remarkable in the fact that he could have a conversation with somebody that he disagreed with fundamentally on policy, but be civil, be cordial, be encouraging to that person, be friends with that person. The friendship that he has with the Clintons, for example, that's something that we don't see today. So I hope that that's what young politicians take away from that.
We thank Greg Butler for being with us today. Nancy Johnson, you're going to stick around because we have some questions about you and the Republican Party. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. But thank you, Greg. And when we come back, we'll talk more with Nancy Johnson. We'll also meet 3 local leaders about what they want from the next administration. And we welcome you to watch past interviews of Face the State, and there are many of them. They're on our website right now, our app, also on our YouTube channel.